VIBErations Podcast, Part 17, Dr. Merrin Pearse. Hi, I'm Gary Brightman, and this is my weekly podcast called VIBErations. Established in 2018, Vibe is a book and music shop situated in Mui Wo on Lantau Island in Hong Kong. I've decided that this year I'll reduce the number of podcasts from weekly to bi-weekly, which will hopefully give you a better chance of keeping up with them. So what's been happening over the past couple of weeks? Given that the continued COVID-19 restrictions on social gatherings are still in place until at least after Chinese New Year, next weekend, we've been fairly low-key at the shop. I've now stocked up on the 5 Hong Kong countryside series of walking maps produced by the Lands Department. I'd well recommend these, and maybe they'll serve as a New Year's motivation to get you into Hong Kong's vast number of countryside walks to exercise both your body and your mind. Vibe is generally the only place on Lantau Island that stocks these maps, and so they tend to sell out quickly. We have 2 new books on concession. Track of Time, Moments of Transition by Hampton resident Patrick Dransfield. Patrick is generously offering 10% discount to Vibe customers from Friday the 5th of February until April the 1st. Author and photographer Patrick is a long-term resident of Hong Kong and has attempted to express through the medium of photography and writing the emphatic connectedness we share as human beings. He has a deep interest in the visual arts and literature of both the West and China. He's slated for a talk at Vibe when restrictions are lifted. The second book is called Jacob and the Dust Sprite by Mui Wo resident Anna Rios, and it's a nicely written and illustrated children's book. As of Monday the 8th of February, we have a new neighbour at Vibe. A government-sponsored recycling centre called Six has opened up next door. They're open from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. daily, and you can find out more about the centre at wasteeducation.gov.hk. And so that leads us quite nicely into my next series of 3 podcasts with environmentalists. Over the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing Dr. Merrin Pearse, Jenny Quinton of Arc Eden, and Lantau Community Officer Su Yin. Dr. Merrin Pearse began his career as a land surveyor with the New Zealand government just as GPS technology was being introduced to measure land deformation. His interest in measurement science came about following an earthquake in his last year of college, where the corner of his family dairy farm had dropped 2 meters. So, rather than continuing on a path of accounting and economics, he chose to pursue environmental and technology work. His government work had him travelling around New Zealand, surveying in Antarctica and working remotely on international boundary projects such as the Iraq Kuwait Border. During his PhD studies in Australia, he got to experience a very different kind of nature to New Zealand that really ignited his interest in conservation work. Returning to New Zealand, he became a very active volunteer in flora and fauna restoration projects. Working within a large engineering consultancy firm, he experienced many engineering projects that were working against nature rather than with it. So in 2004, he went out on his own as a consultant. In 2006, an opportunity came up to be part of a team setting up a team building and training business in Hong Kong. In 2007, Merrin and his wife, Louise Taylor, moved from Wellington, New Zealand, to Hong Kong and have been part of the Mui Wo community ever since. Both are very active in the community, particularly in the environmental and animal welfare areas, through organisations such as Living Islands Movement and Kirsten Zoo. Merrin is a sustainability strategist, consulting within the Purpose Business Network to some of Hong Kong and region's largest companies and NGOs. When not in the boardroom or companies' recycling bins, Merrin loves getting out on Hong Kong's trails with their dog Salvadore and other poor mates. So, welcome to Vibe, Merrin.
Yeah, it's nice to be back here, Gary.
Thank you. Often in here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so as we do with everybody, we're going to start with 10 quick-fire questions just to warm us up. Not necessarily quick-fire answers. Question number 1, favourite book or author?
Well, pretty much non-fiction or autobiographies, but anything that's not written, as long as it's a video of it or an audio book. So that's my way of reading. I don't like reading books.
Favourite musical artist?
Yeah, it's hard. I think being brought up on a dairy farm where the music was going in the cow shed the whole time.
Okay.
That would be like normal music, just a general radio station, or you go to grandparents of that, and there was classical music going.
Yeah.
And I think what popped out for me was when I first heard what's his name, Jean-Michel Jarre. And things like Oxygen. It kind of took me from being classical music into modern future music.
And interesting that you would hear it in a cowshed.
Yeah, and that's the first time I heard it, and I loved that album since then. Yeah, you got to relax the cows so they get the milk, you might say.
That would, wouldn't it? That really would. Preferred drink?
One with friends. And along that lines, I often say ideally brown bubbles.
Okay.
So I don't like champagne, but a beer that's got bubbles rather than a more flatter English ale. No, I'll go with something with bubbles and brown.
Do you have a life motto?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Favourite Hong Kong walk?
Anything that avoids a shopping mall.
Good.
And there's so many cool places in Hong Kong, but I think one that just stunned me in a really good way was down southwest Lantau. It's above the Fan Lao area where you're up on the coastal cliffs.
Yes.
And you're looking down at these beautiful sandy beaches. You're seeing campgrounds where they're looking out at the water, pink dolphins swimming past, things like that. And you're just going, wow, this is incredible.
Yes.
But that's what Hong Kong walks generally do.
Favourite Hong Kong restaurant?
Anything street food, but here right in Mui Wo, have to mention what we refer to, thank you, because it's actually called Yi Hen Seafood Restaurant. One of the ones in the old Cook Food Market here.
Yes.
So it's at the beach end there. And being in Mui Wo for 14 years, first night we turned up there, sat down, just Louise and I, had ordered a beer, waiting for the food to come. We were sharing a beer, and next minute this hand reaches across and picks up the beer bottle and pours it into their own glass. And you're just kind of going, man, I don't know where you're from, but in many parts of the world, this is called right by now.
Yes, yeah.
And it was the cook.
Oh, really?
He turned around and went off with his beer. And he just said, thank you. And you just left kind of going, right.
Wow.
A few minutes later, bang, the full beer bottle came back on the table, new one.
Faced with a python whilst walking up to the peak, what would you do?
Stop and just go, wow. And then probably take a half step back as I work out whether he's had breakfast or not. And then just watch it and enjoy it and make sure others stopped and enjoyed it and didn't try and chase or hurt it or that, because they're incredibly beautiful animals.
Yeah.
Been lucky to be able to hold some at sometimes and that type of thing. I mean, just impressive.
Just marvel at it, basically.
Enjoy the colours, the way they're so confident moving and that.
Yes.
And they're not going to be going after you. Yeah, sure, if you have a little small dog, you might have to watch that. But other than that, amazing animals.
Yeah, it's going to be safe. Actually, you had a video with a python on it, didn't you? Very impressive. Last year.
I was walking along doing the standard, teenager, millennial type of thing, head down, looking at the phone, walking two dogs, and look up, and it was within 2 meters of a small Pomeranian we were looking after, a good old Mr. Oates, you might say, and it was like, oh my goodness, step back and just watched it and videoed it.
Yeah, and it was a great video, actually. And I must say, Oates was asking for it. What's the best advice you were given?
Give things a go. Well, what's the worst thing that could go wrong?
Yes.
If you plan for that, well, then, and you're ready to accept that, well, go for it. That was one of the questions when we had the opportunity to come up here to Hong Kong, was well, what's the worst thing that could go wrong? You run out of money and you might go back to New Zealand. The rocking chair test. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one.
No.
So you're sitting on the porch in your retirement.
Yeah.
What are you going to tell people that you've done in your life? What were you pleased of doing, and what was the thing that you wished you'd tried and didn't?
Finish this sentence. I live in Hong Kong because
I was faced with the challenge of, if I went back to New Zealand and worked in the environment space there, in the sustainability space, how much a difference could you make with 5 million people? We've only just got to that. Whereas if I stay in Hong Kong and work with a couple of companies, which I've been lucky to do, when you consider that the capital of New Zealand is Wellington, has a population around 400,000, and I've been lucky to work on sustainability projects with Jardine Matheson. They employ across Asia 400,000 people. So it's the leverage impact of being near China in this region with the big corporates that you don't easily get to do in New Zealand.
That's interesting, really. I'd like to explore that, because that's sort of assuming you wanted to make a difference.
Yes.
You were brought up on a farm. Where did that ambition come from?
I don't know. And maybe it's just my love of nature and hanging out with nature. Mum and Dad would say if I was lost as a 2 or 3 year old, they'd know where to find me around the house. It wouldn't be in the house. I'd be outside in the dog kennel. I'd have gone off to have a sleep and a time out with the dog type of thing.
Yeah.
So being around animals, I just think you kind of saw the interaction between people and animals and how we're reliant on each other.
Yeah.
And that interest in the ecosystem and what's going on, life cycles and that. And that whole work that I got into following, as we mentioned, the getting into the surveying rather than being an accountant. Because of like, how's things done? How do we change things? And getting into places where you can get people thinking differently. That's what I love doing. It's just like, well, why do you do it that way? And someone says it's in the manual. It's like, great, we can change the manual.
Exactly.
It's just written down.
Exactly. It's using a bit of lateral thought, isn't it? It's thinking outside the box a bit more. And
something from nature, you can pretty much find a similar story there and saying, well, this works this way. So is it likely that we can do that? In this project we're working on? Because I get involved a lot with, well, my Cantonese nickname or that is Dr. Lapsap. Because I'm always talking rubbish and doing recycling.
Love it.
So it's one of the
Lapsap.
So a lot of my corporate work is looking in recycling bins and rubbish bins, saying to people, why is this here? Throwing away stuff. Someone's paid for this. Someone's had to put it here. There's energy, resources, all gone into that. So how do we reduce what goes into the recycling bins and what goes definitely into the rubbish bins? And then that works way back up some interesting conversations. You end up at the boardroom saying, let's push this agenda along.
There's a sort of common fallacy that in Hong Kong, what gets separated into the waste bins, metal, glass, paper, plastic, all ends up in the same place again. Is that true or not? Or
it totally depends on where you are and what's going on. And you may have noticed in Hong Kong, our roadside 3-colour bins have been changed in their labelling because the government started to focus in on plastic drink bottles because that's kind of the bulk of the plastic. So plastic bottles, what they're capturing. But at the moment, we don't really have a back-end system to automatically separate things. So if you do put things like the food left over in a container and it goes in and spills across the other materials, that means it gets dirty and we don't have the cleaning system for plastics or metals. Paper, once it gets food waste or oil on it, it really lowers its value. So keeping your office A4 paper separate from newspapers, separate from cardboard with tapes and packaging and labels and all that.
Anything which is a different material on that material.
Because you've got to separate it. And so this is where we get into a system of, I really think Hong Kong's missing that we haven't gone and got what's called MRF, a materials recovery facility, which is where you've got technology that assists the separation that people are doing, that it can automatically separate metal from plastic and paper and down to the colours and that. So world-class Asian city, but our recycling waste management is get it to the incinerator that's coming and get it to landfill. So do keep recycling, but if you're in the office situation, make sure your office paper is not just mixed with other types of material. Then the recyclers will love it.
Sellotapes or
all that's got to come off it. And then aluminium cans. I switched from drinking beer out of a brown glass bottle initially because an aluminium can, Granny's going to collect that. So I get the beer, I get happy, she gets happy because she gets money as well. To change the glass recycling in Hong Kong, glass is one of the things that's best recycled in Hong Kong. If you can get it into the glass bins that are scattered all over the place now, they are being collected and managed very well. Metal gets emptied by Granny and Granddad. We don't need to discuss why that is the case in Hong Kong, but it's sad that our social support systems doesn't support those people. So then they might pull out the paper and the card, but plastic, it's bulky, light, doesn't go anywhere in the sense that it takes a lot to transport it to a place. So it's cost of getting it to a place. So that's where the bins work. If we don't stuff it up totally and do make a little bit of effort to make sure the right things go there.
I remember, really, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, where bottles were the thing that we couldn't recycle here. So it sounds like we've made the biggest advances in glass recycling in Hong Kong. Is that the case?
Yep, we've made some good progress there, and they're starting to catch up on the plastics in a way.
Which I think that's the other big important thing, isn't it, really? If you can avoid buying from supermarket, if you can buy from wet food markets, from bulk sort of places as we've got in Mui Wo, it's a positive, isn't it?
You also have to look at not only the packaging the product comes in, but the bulk packaging that comes in and how it's wrapped. So whether you're buying an apple at the wet market or at the supermarket, if it's coming in that silly foam, spongy stuff, and they've pulled it off and thrown it somewhere. So whether it's your private life or work life, try and look back up the chain to see what's happening. Because we were surprised when I was doing a project with Cathay Pacific on what was being loaded on the planes. A lot of the plastic was actually the wrapping of the items that weren't plastic.
Right.
And so it's the bag that everything goes in.
Yeah.
Making sure you know what the material is.
Seeing the animals and growing up with the animals was a sort of that precipitated something in you, did it? Or
it did, and that's when seeing the difference in nature in New Zealand and Australia, coming back to New Zealand after my PhD, it was a case of I didn't know enough about New Zealand wildlife, so got very much involved with that. The challenges in New Zealand, like everything's basically a bird and there's rats and cats and dogs that'll just catch them and kill them type of thing, because there's no native cats or dogs or any other mammals other than bats in New Zealand. And I ended up down the bottom of the South Island for 2 weeks cutting batteries around to put little electrical heat pad to put on eggs when these kakapo, a very rare parrot, parent went off at night. So you're basically there, the doorbell went off as they left the nest. You went and put this little electric blanket on them, kept the eggs warm, because at that stage there was only 87 of these birds in the world. I was lucky enough to help a sound recordist one day shift some of these eggs. In a little toolbox, we had 3 fertile eggs, and you're walking on muddy, dirty trails that are just like not easy to walk on. And you go, where else in the world do I get a chance to hold 3% of a world's population and do not want to trip over? And I use that story a lot in getting kids inspired about what are they passionate about here in Hong Kong, and also in, similarly in the corporate world, is that what can you think of that you could be involved with, that you could be a part of 3% of the population? And they're quiet for a moment. And reasonably often, kids come up with the Chinese white dolphin, the pink dolphin. There's only about 100 of them here. We don't even know the porpoise. So very easily again, you can use that to get people going, oh, wow, I could do something right here. And so there's 15 years later, we're at about 211 birds now in the world. Very slow, because they only breed every 6 or 7 years. And so
amazing.
So the kakapo, amazing project going on.
What's your favourite area of Hong Kong?
Anywhere outside, as you gathered, don't put me in a boardroom for too long. Get me out of the shopping malls. Well, Lantau, 14 years here. We looked at living outside Kong and that. The traffic was a bit more, so I'd rather take a ferry into Central when I need to, rather than, and you know how long it's going to take. And you know when you've missed it, that you can sit at the waterfront and just wait for the next ferry to come along and chill out and watch the lights and all the madness that is Hong Kong going on.
Tell us a little bit more about how you ended up in Hong Kong.
It's interesting. Well, the first time was 3 weeks before the handover in 97. Passing through here on the way back to Australia. We're still living in that area of the world, and we did a stopover at that stage. And it's kind of seen Hong Kong at that time for 2 nights. 1 night in Macau, 2 nights in Hong Kong. Then as I went out on my own consulting, we had this opportunity while we were in New Zealand to be part of a team building training enterprise up here in Hong Kong, and we were running that remotely. And then the other shareholders said, hey, why don't you and Louise go up to Hong Kong and run this? It's kind of like, how are we going to make money? Well, what are we going to do? We weren't on a corporate package. We were coming up as an entrepreneur who hadn't really been here. Got up here and enjoyed that. Realised I should have learnt some more Cantonese to really help that. And then after a year and a half, we on-sold that business. And at that stage, because of the language and corporate training, it was going to be easier for the products we're doing if someone could speak both languages to do the training. And so we were sitting here going, well, what next? What do we want to do? And, well, where shall we go? And it was, no, what do we want to do? And then it was like, okay, we want to do more for environment. We don't have children, so it meant moving was a little bit easier.
Yes. Yeah.
Or not moving type of thing. So realizing that you could have both here and it impacted a business sense as well as a really good personal growth outdoor experience and that. Yeah. And so that's why we decided, well, let's stay in Hong Kong. Give it a go. Yeah. A bit more on and changing. And then I ended up working for Friends of the Earth for 4 years. And over that time, that's really when I learned about the waste management, recycling systems going on and what wasn't. And that's how I've ended up with the consulting in the sustainability space now, from that work with corporates on roadside air pollution that I was doing, which is quite good because that's improving our air quality here in Hong Kong. But that's the part I love, is having the closed door conversations with corporates and government to look for solutions that we can work through and come to a point of disagreeing, but agreeing that we still need to improve in an area, and how do we work. That's my style. That's what I love. Like so many parts of the world, people ask me, why am I not in New Zealand? And I kind of go, well, I can make a difference here. And they say, well, isn't it all kind of like perfect in New Zealand? And you go, no, you get a little bit of layers off. Anywhere's got an issue. But I just love working in a space where you can actually, and by work I mean I do a lot of volunteering as well. Like Living Islands movement, green drinks, on animal rescue group, Kirsten Zoo, and these things, as well as Mazarang, which is based on reforestation in Indonesia and trying to stop wildlife trafficking from Indonesia. And then somewhere in there I do kind of get some work done with corporates. So that's what I love about the freestyle consulting. I can mix up my projects, and pretty much everything I choose is based on a simple philosophy: is, will this make a difference to help people reconnect with nature? And once we get the connection back to nature again, like water, air pollution, animals, then there's a reason for them to kind of do something at work. They kind of see how it connects with their family.
I mean, it sounds harsh, but maybe is COVID a positive thing there, because people have actually now been forced to have time to think and get out of their normal work situation. They're just, because a lot of people can say, well, look, I'm just too busy for this now. I've got this busy, high-powered job. I do agree with everything you're saying, but...
and the but, I think, has come up when... high-powered jobs, lots of money, but you can't get home to family, or you can't travel to a certain wonderful place that you thought you would go to. So you then start looking at home, and what's been great to see is the level of people out walking in Hong Kong. So I really think that's going to help our nature conservation awareness and expectations to look after our country parks even more than they currently do, and hopefully even get some more marine parks that are actually protected rather than a fishing zone.
Okay, Merrin, so if people want to get involved a bit with sort of conservation and environmental issues, how would they go about that?
There's so many ways to kind of, what I'd say is, help improve your local community. Starting with simple things like, if you notice the recycling bins are overflowing, ring up 1823 and ask for them to be empty more often.
1823.
1823, the simple number. The app on your phone for that. Challenges with COVID, they're not taking general environment things at the moment, but keep that in mind for when you can use that channel. When we first came to Hong Kong, we were living up the valley in the area where Jenny Quinton's got Arc Eden. So there's a number of different ways to get involved. Like Arc Eden, they're always looking for people to come and help watering trees. I emphasize watering trees because that's more of a requirement than planting trees. A lot more days after you've planted a tree where the tree needs water for many years, and weeding it and things like that. Then you've got other groups that are going on, like the farm to table kind of groups. They're trying to improve the options for getting food grown locally. And so we're lucky in Mui Wo that there is also the Outer Islands Women's Association do that food collection for waste food scraps that gets composted. So look out for that.
Is that the sort of Winnie the Farm thing?
Is that part of the Winnie the Farm, and Miffy's working a lot on that. I got to know Miffy's programs, and that links into groups like Save Lantau Alliance, which is more of a Cantonese focus on transport, environment issues, so wetland filling, destruction of stuff like that. And then, of course, I'd be totally happy for people to volunteer and help with Living Islands movement. moment. We're looking for people there that are passionate, talking about like the transport side of things. Some that want to learn more about the legal side of things for town planning applications, zoning regulations, things like that. And of course, like most sites, social media, people want to help us promote that and build websites. That's I mean, any one of these entities I've mentioned all need that back-end support. So it doesn't have to be out in the field. It can be in the office, you might say, while you're at home helping the groups. So look up. Mui Wo Tayo Family is a great place to see what's going on.
Very true.
If you're worried about seeing a python, join Hong Kong Snakes.
That's right.
That'll get you to understand all the snakes on South Lantau.
Will Sargent's
perfect
thing.
So many ways for people to be
there
part of the
is
community.
Actually, isn't there? When you think about it, even just you mentioning them there, you know, the fact that we're in Lantau, most people living here do have a social conscience and awareness for environmentalism.
Look at your local community group that you converse with. And that's why I mentioned like the Mui Wo Tayo Family's Facebook page or other groups like that. Ask the question publicly there. Rather than doing one-on-one, I always love having a conversation that's one-to-many like this. Because then the leveraging effect is a lot more beneficial, and then others learn. Even if they don't want to participate, they know to tell someone else.
That's true. It's kind of self-governing, isn't it, that Mui Wo Tayo family? It's the right person who eventually will get the right answer out there. All right, I think with that, it just remains for me to say thank you very much, Merrin, for coming to talk to us today.
Pleasure to be talking again.
You can listen to all of our podcasts published at SoundCloud under Gary Brightman, or on YouTube under Live at VIBEHK, or follow the links from my website at vibehk.com. If you'd like to be interviewed for the weekly podcasts, or have a local Lantau business you want mentioned, then please contact me at Vibe. Finally, a reminder that Vibe is open 7 days a week, every day of the year, from 12 noon until approximately 6:30 each evening. Well, that's it for another week. Thanks for listening to the 17th Vibe Book and Music Shop podcast called VIBErations. I'm Gary Brightman. You get my vibe?
Can you imagine what this old island must have looked like to those Dutch sailors when they first saw it? Fresh green. Like a dream of a new world.
They must have held their breath. Afraid it would disappear before they could touch it.